Candyman, a podcast about Sweet Tooth. I'm Alex.
I'm Justin.
I'm Pete.
And this is our big finale episode. We've recapped every episode of the show. And once again, we are very thankful to be joined by Sweet Tooth showrunner Jim Mickle.
Welcome.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thanks for having me back, guys. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. So excited to chat. Now, I could be wrong about this, but you finished this show 5 to 10 years ago, I believe.
Yeah, roughly. Yeah. Between the COVID and the strike, I don't know what time means.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's talk about the timeline first before we get into anything. And obviously, I think people probably at this point, hopefully, have listened to our recaps. If not, we're going to spoil the show. We're going to talk about it, full spoilers on. But when we last talked to you at season 2, you had secretly already filmed the third season at that point.
That's right.
So what was the process like? Like, what was the thought process in getting both of those out at the same time? And then what has the intervening process been like as well?
I mean, we finished season 1, and then we started writing season 2 before season 2 got picked up. So it was even before season 1 aired. So it was sort of like in case, in case this does well, we can be ahead of it. So I think we were about 5 weeks into it then, which is always weird because you're like, I don't know how this is, and that was its own sort of weird experience. And then I pitched out season 2 to Netflix, but it just kind of felt like we're teeing this up for next season 3 to be the last season. Like it felt like that was where it was going to go. And as we were sort of talking about Netflix, I think they could sense it too. And so they called me back after the pitch, like just a couple of them were like, listen, kind of sidebar, unofficially, if we were to pick up the season, having just gone through the whole Stranger Things experience and, a lot of shows where kids are aging and waiting for a year in between seasons to pick it up, would it make sense if we were to go ahead and do 2 seasons back to back and have that be the end? And at that point, it was kind of music to my ears because I was like, I feel like it ends next season. That period where you come back and you wait is always so weird because you're sort of in this weird stasis. And so the idea of going right ahead would be great. I think we all did, wildly underestimated just how hard 1 season is, let alone 2 seasons. So we were writing season 3 while we were filming season 2, which was very hard. Wow. And then only had about a month in between, and we were already building season 3 sets towards the end of season 2. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of multitasking going on at that point. But I'm glad we did it. It was it was definitely like going to trade away, years of my life in order to have a sort of a 3 complete seasons of the show to feel good about. It was worth it.
So you're saying the secret to television is have a baby or child in the starring role, and then they'll keep greenlighting you back to back.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I just wanted to ask just more about the timeline, just because I'm very curious about this. So, I don't remember how much we talked about this, to be honest with you, with the season 2, but killing off Abbott at the end, that's something, at least from the comics, that's something that's left for the end. Like, he's the ultimate bad guy. Going into season 3, we now have Zhang, we have her whole family. Those are the main antagonists here. Did that, I assume that entered into the process a little bit, being like, okay, we can kill off Abbott, we can move it.
Yeah, because we know we're going to go. Yes, definitely. I think if we hadn't, that would have been a tougher decision. So there's a lot of blessings in it. When you have another season, it's funny because somebody told me one time, like, you don't save good ideas when you're writing television. You don't save them because you never know if you're going to get that far, which is very true. In that case, we kind of could because we did know, that we are going to have another season here, and we wanted to feel different than this season. So it felt okay to tell the end of Abbott's story and the last Moon story, and start to depart from the comic, knowing that we were going to be able to have a whole other season to explore that stuff.
That's, as someone who is a comic book fan, loved the material, what's nice is we have something we love, but then it changes when you bring it to a different medium like this.
Hopefully.
But in a good way. I didn't feel like you disrespected the source material.
Good.
It was nice as a fan of something to go in and kind of not know how it's going to all go, but yet still feel like you're in the world. After you shared all that, I just wanted to say congratulations. It's been a nightmare with everything going on and a real pandemic while you guys are shooting kind of like a fake pandemic. But Congratulations. You landed the ship. You nailed it. I mean, what a satisfying ending. And you really played with our emotions. That second to last step, I thought Jep was going to die at every turn, and I was crying the whole time.
A lot of Jep watch.
Oh my God. The Jep watch was real.
That's good. That's good.
Man, worth it. Really made the journey worth it with the 3 seasons, man. Congratulations.
Good. That's the other thing, too. I think, I still have feature brain, so I still think in like beginning, middles, and ends. So, and I think that's another challenge with TV is you're constantly trying to sort of, leave things in a way that can continue to spin. So it was really nice to be able to know that we're going to be coming to we're going to be sticking a landing in this or coming to a landing in this is really, it's a cool thing to do.
I am curious, based on what Pete's saying, though, was Jep's death on the table at any point? Was that something you discussed?
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny because we always went between that and the sort of the CTE. There are elements of his storyline that always felt like, yes, this is going to be, and every time you start to go there, you go like, I don't know, like the Jep in the comic, yes, the guy that we have on screen, it's a different thing. So you start to back up and you don't really know. I mean, I feel like the end of the finale could be interpreted multiple ways, and that was sort of how I kind of came away feeling like there's each way that you look at the end of that story, it kind of works in its own way. So I'll leave it at that.
Oh, that's nice. I love that. Yeah. It struck me watching this season just how much the show changed from the first season. Like, it's wild. Thinking back to the like sort of fun and always had the weight of dystopia, but like the Pobo stuff was such like and Will Forte being the sort of such a big part of it. What was it like going on that, especially when you did season 2 and 3 back to back? Because even between those, it was a wild tonal change and just the whole thing. How did you create that space?
Trial and error. Like, I think we started season 2 writing. I at least started season 2 writing the same Gus from season 1, but it really felt like it was sort of dishonest because he wasn't that kid anymore. And we would always sort of joke, like, in story terms, it's only been a couple of days in his life. Like, the whole story is maybe a couple of weeks in the life of Gus, but so much had changed from being the naive kid, and he had seen so many things that like adults don't even see. So it felt false when we started season 2 to just be the same Gus as we went along. And then the same thing happened with season 2 into season 3. And I remember thinking like, oh, this will be pretty seamless. And it was really only a couple of weeks. It was probably like putting the finish on the season 2 finale and then going in and doing another draft of the 301. But even that was like, he has changed so much, and Wendy has changed so much. We can't just continue to treat them like they're the same 8-year-old kid. This is not the same story, and it really felt like this is a coming of age story as he gets older. And where season 3 locked into me was like I really felt like we've gotten to a point now, like, and I think a lot of shows wrestle this, like, no one's ever going to believe that we're going to kill Gus off, so you can't really do like a episode cliffhanger where he's like, oh my god, did Gus die? You can't really do that, which is really hard to do. The story of someone you're trying to constantly put in jeopardy. And so one of the things that I think really hit for me in season 3 was like his innocence can be at stake. Like, his life is not at stake, but his innocence can be at stake. I think that's part of growing up, right? It's like, there with Christian, like, you see Christian go from this little 8-year-old nugget into a professional actor who is bordering on being a teenager. And there's something along the way there where you're like, is that innocence and that sweetness, is that always going to stay? And so that really was the thing that clicked into place of like, that's the thing that we're really wrestling with here for Gus as he gets older. And that meant having to confront him with really heavier things and heavier issues, I think, than we would have in season 1.
Well, I think this is something that we talked about when we were recapping the show a lot and talking through it, is he has all of these parental figures littered throughout everything.
Yeah.
Obviously you've got Jep, who is the stand-in for his dad. We could probably talk about the Will Forte Poba of it all in a second. But then Birdie is the big driving factor, at least initially in the season, to draw him there.
Yeah.
How do these all play in for you from your perspective? I mean, and also throwing Singh on that pile as well, who has such a tonal turn from, not to borrow from Lost right behind me, but he turns from a man of science to a man of faith over the course of the season.
Yeah. Very good question. For me, a lot had to do with like the pandemic itself. Like season 1, obviously we were writing it and filming it during the sort of the peak COVID and all that. When that ended, when it came out, and it came out in an era where it was like, is it done? Is it really over? Is it? We were sort of in that weird limbo thing. Like that was when we were starting working on season 2, and we were having all these questions like, can I go back out? Like, can I do the, there was all this uncertainty in the world. And so in a weird way, I think season 2 is kind of about that. It was about it's over. Are we on the other side of this yet? Can we move on? And then season 3 became more of like a Ghost of Christmas Future, where it was really like, we're opening the scale. We're going to go to Alaska. We're going to see a countryside that's changed. We're going to see all this stuff. How are we now on the back of a pandemic and having all this experience something in the world? How are we now going to move forward? How are we going to learn and go for it? So that was sort of the organizing principle between sort of season 1 and 2 and 3 for me. It's fun when I look at it, like I don't really see that obliquely, which is good. I think that's great when you can sort of have these things and they sort of go into the dough and you need it. So that was a little bit how that stuff shaped out. Season 3, I feel like kind of became a season about motherhood because, season 1 was so much about fatherhood, and especially episodes of 2. And so I think having Zhang, having this sort of, cold motherly figure sort of on the other side of the story, having not just Birdie, but then also having Ikiak, our sort of our flashback to, the beginning of our story, having the new character, Sienna, dealing with all these different shades of motherhood felt like that's sort of also going to be the thing that sets season 3 apart from the other seasons.
Yeah.
Sorry, just on the pandemic of it all, how do you feel? What would it have been like to do this show without that? It feels like you're saying, it sort of got into the dough, willfully or not. Like, can you imagine what it would be like?
I mean, I love to think it wouldn't be that different, but I'm sure it would. I mean, I remember weeks before the writer's room started, and I probably mentioned this last time, like I was looking for information on pandemic and just what that would be like. And there was a Netflix documentary called Pandemic, and I remember turning it on and it offered like nothing. It was just like nothing here. Little did I know, like the world was about to offer something up. So coming out of that, I don't know. That was always one of the challenges of the comic book too, right? It's like two concepts that could be their own movies or series, right? A post-pandemic story, and then also this new species, origin, evolution story. And how do you make those two things live together? I think that was always a challenge. Maybe it would have been easier to sort of bake out that part if that wasn't in our lives all the time. But I remember just coming out and sort of being like, the question sort of going into the pandemic was like, how are we as a globe, as a planet? We've never really experienced anything in our lifetime that affected each and every person on the planet in some sort of unifying way. How are we going to sort of respond to that? And then coming out and just being like, we bungled it. Like as a species, we just absolutely bungled it. And when you look at things like climate change and like, what's going to happen going forward, you're just like, we couldn't figure that out. And that literally was a thing that tried to kill all of us,
And that was an easy version of that.
Yeah. Exactly. That was the layup, how are we going to, and so that was kind of what season 3 was really, it was like, going forward. I remember one of our writers sort of said, like, going into this season, everybody carries some sort of wound, emotional wound or physical wound, Gus literally has half an antler, everybody, Wendy just lost, her mother figure. So everybody going into the season is dealing with something really traumatic. But the landscape is as well, and going into like the last final minutes, perhaps, of human evolution. What is that going to look like? I thought that was really something that made season 3 felt like it landed.
So it would have been, do you think it would have been easier to do the show if a new species of hybrids emerged?
Yes, much easier.
Definitely make casting and special effects easier, for sure.
Yeah.
You mentioned the wound thing, and I did want to ask you generally about the tree and the mythology, but is that what led to the axe and the tree? Was that part of that wound theme?
Yeah, wound. Yeah, literally wound in the tree. And, it was just one of those things like, I love the mythology that was in the comic book. I love the spirit of what was in the comic book, but it was also in sort of classic Jeff style. Like it was very lyrical and it was very amorphous. And we sort of have this phrase, we talk about a lot. One of our writers brought up, and it's sort of one of my go-to phrases, like, how do you put all that in here? How do you put all that into a screen, whether that's on page, whether that's something you're going to depict? And it was like, how do we do that? How do we do that? How do we do that? And we were kind of talking through it. we were talking to also several cultural advisors who were also sort of steering us away from certain things, steering us towards certain things. And at some point that tree idea sort of popped up, and it really just felt like that's the story that we've been telling all the time. One of the first things we see of Gus and Puma in the pilot, tapping the maple syrup on the tree, and just the fact that sort of the circle of life and how that keeps going. And it just felt like, yes, I love when those things pop up, that sometimes it's intentional, sort of in the stew already, and you're sort of realizing that you planted these seeds that you can play with. So that one really clicked, I think, and again went right with the sawing off the antler too.
Yeah. Let me throw this out to you, and you can tell me whether I'm totally off base, because we were trying to sort of like talk through the tree and the mythology of the answers of the final episode. So Thacker chops the tree, the sap leaks into the groundwater and the ice and kind of gets all over the world that way, which causes the sick, which causes the hybrid children. I think, okay, so I get all that part.
The core, they drill the core. Fort Smith drills the core out of the ice that has leaked that in there. So what they're actually pulling out is some of them, leaked out of the tree.
And then Gus burning it, though, that basically, how does that part, this is the part that's like sticking me up. Like, how does that cure?
I think like the fact that that axe is in there means like it's sort of in the stasis, like it's not allowed to heal, it's not allowed to die. And I think one of the things that we really wanted to get into also is like one of the things that makes for like healthy forest is like burning and starting over. And like I've always been obsessed with the idea of like compost, like what makes your garden grow the best. It's like dead plants, that have a chance. And so it's all about that, like. And maybe it came from like an organic gardening, like the kick that I was on early on, but like I love how nature sort of gives you all the tools to be able to do all that. And so our thinking was, yes, this tree like really should have been chopped down. Like it should have been done, but it's been in this period for like 100 years where it's like not allowed to die and not allowed to move on, and it's not allowed to restart. And so back there is like thinking it's actually about pulling this thing out and letting it heal, but it's actually like, no, it's actually supposed to die. It's supposed to burn down so that something new can come from it. And we've been stuck in this period where we have humans, but we also have hybrids, and they're supposed to coexist at some point. But it's actually nature turning the page and just going like, yeah, no, we actually gotta move on from humans and move on to what's next.
And then awesome. On that same note, and I think you kind of teased this already, but at the end when Singh is holding his antler and the little plant is going out, that's the cycle we're getting again. That's the tree.
That's the new one. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Okay, so at some point in the future, all the hybrids will die and the humans will come back.
Yeah. Yes.
Right, figured it out. Season 5, baby. Bring it on.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we explained the tree. We're good there.
I just wanted to ask, like, what is your kind of like favorite moment that you guys pulled off? I mean, there's some amazing sets. Like, I loved when they were on the boat and talking to the kid on the CB was amazing. I mean, we talked about how you nailed the ending. I mean, we got the bro show finally get a little Brolin face there.
James
that was
Brolin,
just, I mean,
just
hold on. Let's stop on that for a second, just to ask specifically about that, because we were speculating about this all season long, but I never thought it would actually happen. Like I never thought we would actually get James Brolin as old Gus. How did that actually work out? How did you actually get him on set to do this?
I mean, kind of similarly, we were pretty late in the game making season 3. We're like, are we really doing this? Are we really? So it was always the plan going in. Like that was the plan. That was, there's a page of the pitch document from 2017 that's like, how does it end? And it literally is like, it ends on the porch hearing old man Gus, which is, pulled from the comic book, old man Gus telling the story of the end of human, civilization and that story. And we will go forward with that. Now, in telling the story, the narrator became such a big portion, obviously, in the pilot. And so when we originally talked to Jim about coming in and doing this voiceover, it was like, as you go forward, just so you know, like this ends with you on the porch telling this. But at that point, it was like looking back, it's so funny because that was just a pilot. There was no reason to think we were going to get another episode anymore. Literally explaining this to him on the phone. I imagine he's like by the pool in Malibu, like hanging. He's just like, "What? I'm doing what now?"
I don't know what this guy's talking about. He got you on mute. This guy's crazy.
100%. 100%. But as you know, it's like he's one of the first people that sees the episode because, you know, we finish the episode, we lock it, and then he records the voiceover. And so for reasons, it was the process of like showing him the episode, explaining what the episode was about and what the voiceover related to. And so he almost got like this cool like recap thing of the seasons as they come together. Nice. And then it's like, and so, you know, when it ends, like that's you know, so it was one of those things. But I think we got into like, we were a couple months into filming season 3, and we were still like, are we really going to pull the trigger on like getting the mold of him from LA so we can start building these ears? Are we really going to go through there? Are we really going to and it was like, are we really going to put him through all this? We're going to fly him to New Zealand for one day, bring him to this crazy set surrounded by kids in animatronic outfits and puppets, and you know, and have him do this thing. And it just speaks to how cool he was. That it was like, no question. He's of course.
That's
he came, and it was like the last week that we filmed, and he was just so gracious, and I think it meant so much to everybody because you know, they knew sort of what it meant to Bobby on screen, but also his history. I think he had shot something in New Zealand like really early in his career, like decades ago, and so for him to come back, I think it meant something for him too. Wow. So it was a really cool experience, and it was like one day, and then he got up and was like, that was just a magical thing, and then he left, and it was like, it was so cool. It was wow. But it was definitely like, wow, are we really doing this?
Well, similarly, it was also so satisfying, and I was hoping this was going to happen the entire time, but again, didn't believe it would actually happen. Getting Will Forte back as Papa.
Yeah.
What? Tell us the story of that one. How did that go?
Yeah, tell us all the dad stories. Yeah. The daddies of.
You're like, hey, do you remember the show you shot like 5 years ago?
Totally.
We're still going.
I don't know. It felt like there was a lot that Gus had to sort of learn at that moment. It was like, who better to sort of teach? It felt like, again, it's like you start small and you start with this window, which is just Gus and Pubba in the first episode. And then every episode you sort of peel back a little bit and you're adding in another character. So you're sort of gradually opening the point, which I love. Like I can't really get into shows that just start with like the widest aperture and you're just expected to know everything and understand everyone is like. So I love that we sort of started that way and kind of came in, but it also felt like we sort of had to end the show the same way too. Is like, you know, even though there's all these characters, like how do we come back around and really make it about that sort of core seed of what the show was? So that came about kind of organically, and I remember that was always a thing for some reason that he was going to be at the end. I don't remember why, but it was just always a thing.
Well, but you also had Pete. I think you called this one out. That amazing moment where Will Forte, where Pubba and Jep nod to each other.
Oh yeah,
so great.
Just seeing them together on screen was so heartwarming and beautiful.
Yeah. That was so Dan Stewart, one of our writers, and wrote 7 with his writing partner. But I remember we were talking about it was so funny, the little things that come about in production. And then when you look back, like that was the thing. The big question was like, what is that set? Like, where are they when that happens? And it was like, it's like a limbo place, you know? It's like, it's not the afterlife. It's not here. It's not this. But we just spent so much time trying to figure out like, is it the woods? Is it this? Is it that? So much time. It wound up being exactly what it needed to be. And it kind of spoke to the confidence I think we had as we were finishing the show, that it was like, we were about a week away from shooting it, and it still was like, where's this location? But it always just sort of made sense. But I remember asking Dan, our writer, who kept pitching this idea, he's like, they look at each other and they nod. I'm just like, explain that to me. So like Jeffrey walks into this limbo and then just walks away, and he described it exactly like it was in there. And then I remember directing that and getting there, and it would be like, it was exactly like you said, Dan, and it 100% worked exactly like you thought it was going to work. Like it's really emotional, and it really feels like a connection that I would not have seen, I think, without that.
Oh my God, that's great. Wanted to ask you a couple of quick things, or potentially quick things. I don't remember the episode. I want to say it was episode 3 when we meet the family who's hiding out. We meet Theo, the bat.
Yeah.
Was that a trans metaphor? Like, that's what I was reading into it, with sort of like binding the wings and everything. Is that something you were going for at all?
Yeah, not overtly, but yes. Okay. I think any kind of difference, you know? I mean, I think another thing that we kind of wanted to take out of that was, I felt like season 1 and season 2, Gus is sort of presented with these very sort of ideas of like black and white sort of issues, and really growing up was learning that life was all sort of gray areas. And I think season 3 was all about the gray areas. And so I think I remember thinking it's an odyssey of Gus seeing all these different spectrums of humanity that he hasn't seen yet, and how they all act in what they think might be their sort of final moments of existence, really. And for that, like seeing a family that like loved their kids so much, they sort of over loved them and overprotected them, and sort of took like what Pubba was to him, but took it to like a sort of a toxic place was definitely part of that. And being like, there's something. I got the sort of magic, Disney version, poor Theo did not. So yeah. So yes, whether it's trans, whether it's, like the father himself, he has the cleft palate, like and just like any kind of a difference, I think that was a big key for really.
Yeah. You also have late in the season, this is a very little one, but you had one F-bomb, I believe, in the entire show.
Yes.
What discussions go into that when you're like, okay, we get one here, let's go.
Yeah, it wasn't even that we got one, but it was like, actually, in the pilot, when in the first couple minutes, when Sing first sees the babies and he's like looked out and he sees them all, like that opening shot that was the trailer, I think it was like, probably like 2 or 3 minutes into the pilot, he looks and he says, oh, fuck. And I remember just writing that and just being like, cut the book. And I was like, that tells you what kind of shit you're going to watch. And I remember we were shooting it and the script supervisor was like, should we do a tape? They don't say the F word. I was like, nah, that was 100%. But then suddenly, like the show, you get to the end and you're making it, and suddenly you're like, we're much more of a 4-quadrant show than I think we thought we were. And I remember Netflix sort of saying like, not that we're opposed to it, but to put that so early in a pilot for the show, be watching the kids advertise the type of show. I don't know that it's the kind of show that it is, which is a very valid point. So it was never like a censorship thing, but it was like this probably isn't going to be a thing we do all the time. Are we really going to do this? So we actually VFX him to and he stops and he doesn't really finish it. Yeah. And I was always like, that's pretty cool, but I feel like we're not told we can't do it, but it feels like if we're going to do it, it's got to be at the end. And I was like, if we're going to do it, it's got to be Jeopard and it's got to really land. Because once you do it, it's kind of like in Breaking Bad, there was a great one that Skylar said, like late in the game. And I just remember being like, whoa. And it was so like, and it was like a story point. When she said it, it was like, whoa, we just crossed a Rubicon. So I was like, we're going to do it. Now, the funny thing is, Rosalind loves to improvise. And so when we see her in the scene just before that in the show, she totally just F-bomb. And I'm like, you can't. She's like, oh, are they going to censor us? I'm like, no, not that we can't, but I'm kind of saving it.
Sort of saving it. Yeah, you're being greedy.
Yeah. I'm saving it for our hero. And you can tell that she was kind of like, well, why does he get to do it? And I don't. And it was kind of one of those perfect moments of like where the villains never think they're the villains. She's like, no, of course the villain is the first one to say it. And I was like, nah. So ultimately, funny. We were getting one take from her where she didn't. That's what was in there. But I think when we did ADR, she kind of looked at me like, you coward.
That's funny.
One thing we talked a lot about, especially this season, is the fairy tale nature of the show. And then it has that sort of ability that I feel like it's really hard to do, I think, in TV especially, where it's because everyone's always like, oh, how did that happen? Why did that happen? And I feel like, how do you maintain something where it's a thematic thing, where you have a little bit more license maybe to bend reality, but also you have to keep a fairy tale spirit, like a childlike spirit alive in the show, no matter what episode you're doing. Like, how do you do that?
Yeah. It's a calibration. It's funny you say that because I'm trying to do that in a script right now, and just when I thought like, oh, I'm good, so I'm realizing like, fuck, am I? I'm still trying to figure that out. I mean, part of it is like it's nice when you have a grammar to the show after a while that you can do that and you sort of have that connection with the audience. We did something in Happen Leonard where on season 3 we had a lot of like coincidences and things that just didn't work. In a book, it totally worked because it's told like a backyard porch yarn. And part of the deal is like, that's just how this folk tale is being told. We're going to have those. And suddenly when you put them down bald on the page, they don't quite work. And so part of it was in season 3, sort of learning that like, you can do that if you sort of signal to the audience through the grammar that this isn't reality, that this is a bit of a story, a fairy tale. So I think that was always a part of the choice to have the narration in the show in the first place. It sort of told you from the beginning, like, I'm being told this story. Part of it's music, part of it is the presence of like the younger actors and just telling a story from a sort of a wider, sort of innocent sort of point of view. Some of it's shooting in New Zealand and just having the sort of like already slightly warped, more lush, more fairy tale sort of background. But I think all that stuff kind of adds up to something. Especially, it's interesting, like when the audience wants to go there, and they're sort of waiting to just get permission to sort of accept that connection. I think that's also part of it. So yeah, it's a lot of trial and error.
That's cool.
We would be remiss if we didn't talk to you about Bobby finally showing up in the last episode.
Talking about keeping one in the chamber. How badly did you
brought him up a couple times, and then we finally got to see him.
Yeah, and not only that, you have this amazing shot that we absolutely loved of Elephant Earl holding him like in the baby.
Yes,
so funny.
Where did that come from? Because that made me laugh out loud.
Our scene designer Amanda Neal just killed it. She was like so excited to come back and dress the hybrid kids again, and then at some point it was like that concept with him and like the front. It was like, oh wow, that's the beauty of collaboration when people come in with ideas. It's like yes, 100%, and then you show up on set.
It's there. That's a moment where like a hat on a hat on a hat works.
Yeah.
Where it's like, whoa,
yeah,
got him.
Yes, it was a weird thing to shoot too because there's like puppeteers reaching around.
I bet,
with rods and trying to do that, and you have one of those like we have weird jobs that we're shooting this. If I remember correctly, it was also like it was the end of the day, and it was one of those like we have like a few minutes left. We gotta get this shot now.
Is this worth it?
Like, do it exactly. Is this worth it? And thankfully, yes, I think everybody. Yeah. It was. I knocked my thing out. So Bobby come back. We were still like 4 episodes in, and I was like, guys, I remember telling like the writers, like, guys, are we doing the right thing by not having people on here?
Exactly.
And they would just be like, think about all the practical things that would have to go on to have him here, like I remember toying at some point with like, okay, episode 5 opens with, Gus opens his backpack and Bobby pops out. He's been there the whole time. Tried a bunch of things, and thankfully the rest of the writers talked me out of it, and they were like, we've moved on. Like we moved on. It's a good thing. It'll be worth the payoff at the end, and it was the right decision. Yeah.
Well, I kept thinking Bobby could just tunnel up from anywhere, just show up.
Very specifically, Pete had this vision of in the final battle, he comes up with 2 Uzis and just starts doing it.
I hear that part of our camera team, I saw a funny or I guess they had a running pool whether he's going to come back, and like the day that they showed up to film him, it was like a funny texture. The camera, I forget who won, but somebody won money that day when he showed up and he was on set.
The Bobby bet. Gotta get the Bobby bet in.
Now, 2 quick things before we move on to the most important thing here, which is talking about Candy. First of all, the end. You touched on this a little bit, but you do have that final shot of Jep and Sweet Tooth clinking the maple syrup, which I just think is absolutely perfect. But what work went into finding that, deciding that was the end? Or was that in the pitch document back from the beginning?
That one wasn't. It was in the outline. I remember putting the elements together. Dan, Stewart, Noah, Griffith, and I. At that point, like the writers' room had shed down. It was like the show. You're sort of moving down, and you're getting less and less and less. And Dan and Noah had done 7. I was doing 8. So we did it. I always saw 7 and 8 as like a sort of a 2-part finale. It was like a movie. So we had to make sure that those things worked together. So we would trade scripts back and forth. And I remember when it got to the outline, we had laid out what was in the book, but it felt like, I don't know, it was one of those things that just came about in the outline phase. And I remember kind of writing it and like tearing up and being like, okay, that's a good sign. And I remember sending it to them and be like, I think it's, and they were just like, totally that, And so it was one of those little things that kind of comes out of that year just by being on it, and it worked right away. So
and the last thing before we move on, I'll just ask you, I mean, this feels like probably not going to happen, but there is a sequel series that Jeff Lemire did, Sweet Tooth Return. Has there been any talks about that? Is that anything you'd be interested in doing, coming back for?
I mean, along the way, we kind of talked about what it would look like if we did, obviously things change because the kids do grow up, and Christian is now, he's going to be, he's done so much since we've wrapped that he's going to be a full-on teenager by the time you see him again. So that stuff has kind of changed and moved on. I've had rough ideas that we've talked about what it would look like if we were to move on, and ideas that I'm like, that's cool, I would be into that. Like, that feels like the same thing, but it's something new and feels like it kind of is in the spirit of what Jeff is doing with that story. So definitely things along the way there. I think the big question is just what the audience looks like and how much they want or don't want, or I'm really happy with where it landed again, because I think that we all know of like shows that just went one or two seasons too long or whatever. Yep. I feel like we stuck the landing perfectly.
Sure did.
I did another show, Happen Leonard, that was 3 seasons that we didn't know it was going to end at 3 seasons, and thankfully the final scene was kind of somewhere that I felt like that was a good spot to walk away. But it's such a great opportunity to get to walk away from something at that point that I don't want to question it and go like, we're forcing it just because we think we have to force it. I think that's something that like people really wanted.
Cool.
Real quick, how often do you wake up with James Brolin's narration in your head about your life?
Yeah, exactly. Do you start your day that way?
It's funny. When they were cutting the trailer, they used like the final picture last we had, but without the final sound and all that. And so suddenly your assistant editor, Doug Dietrich, who was our assistant editor, he was our temp voice throughout the whole show. And it's funny, I remember whenever Brolin would come in to record, he'd be like, his voice is pretty great, I don't know why you don't just use his. And it's funny, I heard that again for the first time, and it was like hearing like this weird alternate reality version of Sweet Tooth. Somewhere out there, there's a whole version of Sweet Tooth with a completely different voice that I think the audience would be shocked to hear.
Yeah. Somebody who talks like this.
Great assistant editor. Impressive.
Excellent.
Bobby.
All right. Let's forget about the interview. We're good. We're fine.
Yes.
We covered the show. Let's move into the important part here. As we have done every season with you, we review a piece of candy every episode, and then at the end, we have the Syrup Cup. We declare a winner of our Candy Trial Challenge. We want to do 2 things today. We want to declare a winner of the Syrup Cup for 2024, but since this is the final episode of the last season, we also want to declare the Grand Syrup Cup, the winner for the past 3 seasons. So we'll do one thing at a time, obviously.
Wait. Just so people have an understanding of, his knowledge base and where he's coming from. Is that a giant burrito poster behind you? Is that? Yeah, right there. Yes.
That is Always the
hungry
sealskin map from 6, from episode 6 that they put there's a whale tusk here on the other side that goes in there. And then this over here is one of the wolf puppies.
Nice.
3.
Yeah.
And there's
one of the hound boys.
There's some antlers and ears of Gus.
Oh yes.
Wow.
With the
and there's dog too.
Oh
my gosh. Oh,
nice.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
So there's a whole bunch of little Sweet Tooth bits back there.
Okay, cool.
That's awesome. And just to clarify for Pete, yes, you can wrap a burrito in the sealskin if you absolutely want to.
That's the original burrito with sealskin.
Let's move on
That's why they did it.
to the Syrup Cup. So I'm going to read.
Before Alex reads these, let me just say, many of these are bad. So this will be
come on.
No, it's true though. This was the worst season of candy.
That's not true.
We did a bad job this season.
No,
but I'll read you the 8 candies.
Like, that are your favorites individually?
There are. We argued about it in the last episode.
I don't think you can tell.
Still arguing.
We are. Yes, we're still bickering. This is going to continue far beyond this. This is why we need you to decide. So let me read the 8 candies. You decide. I know you haven't tried them all necessarily, but here we go. Snow caps. We did that for the first episode because they're going to Alaska. Haribo Gold Bears. Snow cap. Okay, they're like chocolate chips with like non-parais or Perels. They're like a movie theater candy thing.
Okay, yeah, I know.
It's like sprinkles on top of a chocolate chip.
Yeah,
a lot of this candy is from like the Victorian age when candy was like rocks with sugar.
We did Haribo Gold Bears, basically gummy bears. Rolos, Reese's Pieces, Boston baked beans, which were awful. Swedish. I don't want to lead you in any direction, but they're very bad. Swedish Fish, Mike and Ike's, and the last but not least, we just ate straight sugar, which is Fun Dip. We had Fun Dip, that is basically just like taking sugar, scooping more sugar. Yeah. So there you go. Do you have a favorite of those, Jim?
Reese's Pieces. Hard to go wrong with chocolate and peanut butter. I also have a soft spot for Haribo gummy bears, more because I had a friend who loved them and refused to accept any other brand. And when I did a little taste test with a different kind of gummy bears, it was definitely that was the one.
Oh, yeah.
And I had them the other day, and I was like, yeah, they're still pretty great. So between those two, if I had to pick, kind of depends on what time of day. I think Reese's Pieces would probably be the
all right.
Yeah. It's interesting you've been involved in other candy competitions, though. So what a profession.
But yeah, 20 years ago.
All right, so we have Reese's Pieces as the winner this time. Here, let's declare the Grand Syrup Cup. These are the picks that you made the past 2 seasons. So Reese's Pieces versus Butterfinger and Snickers. Yeah. So there you go. Snickers, Butterfinger.
Wow.
Reese's Pieces.
Butterfinger.
Not even a thought. Not even a thought.
Yeah, not even a thought. Yeah. Not even a thought. Butterfinger. The buttery coffee. Yeah. Too good. Good.
This guy knows what he's talking about. This guy is smart. He knows what he's talking about.
In New Zealand, they have like the honeycomb. Do we have honeycomb here?
Oh, like
it's
crunchy?
Like that. It's
crunchy?
Like, they're crunchies. They're little crunchy bits. And it's like, and I was like, oh, this is like the inside of a Butterfinger, but in like, chocolate ice cream, stuff like that. And it was like,
oh, wow.
It was like, yeah, that's honeycomb. Like, I don't know what honeycomb is. I know what a Butterfinger is, but they're good no matter what country you're in.
Awesome. Thank you, Jim. Thank you for settling this. Yeah. Congratulations also to Butterfinger.
Yeah.
We'll let
Thanks for all your amazing work. The show was amazing. You really did a fantastic job. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and just
thanks for going on this journey the whole time, guys. This is
it was a pleasure. It was such a blast.
Yeah.
Do you have anything? I know you said you're working on a script. Is there anything else you want to plug? Yeah. Is there anything else coming up for you that you could talk about, or is it all kind of in the works at this point?
Well, still working. Now that this has sort of freed up a little bit of space in life, I'm working on God Country right now, which I think we talked about last time I was on, the Donny Cates comic book. Working on that as we speak. And then working on a couple other things, something that's still sort of early and probably NDA-ish. And then something else, another comic book from that era that I really loved that was wild and out there. And I also make into a show when I first read Sweet Tooth that I'm kind of coming back around to now. But I won't say what it is because it's still sort of working on that. But anyway, there's a bit of a tease. Maybe that'll exist one day.
Well, awesome. Jim, again, congratulations. The show was great. We're so excited to see what you do next. And thank you for helping settling our candy arguments for 3 years.
Thank you. We'll put an email address or a shipping address in here for Butterfinger to send boxes.
Let's get a crate.
Cool. Thanks for watching, guys.
Great to talk to you, Jim.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim. Yeah. And for all of you, if you'd like to support this podcast and all the podcasts we do, patreon.com/Comic Book Club. Also, we do a live show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. on Facebook and YouTube. Come hang out. We would love to chat with you about Sweet Tooth, Apple, Spotify, Android, or the app of your choice. To subscribe, listen, and follow the show at Comic Book Live on Twitter/X, Comic Book Club Live on TikTok and Instagram, comicbookclublive.com for this podcast and many more. There is no more next time, but the Candymen still can.
That's right. Justin said Butterfingers are better than Snickers. He said that.
Nobody better lay a finger on Jim's Butterfinger. It's a pinky. The Butterfinger. The Butterfinger.
Butterfingers be popping.
Popping pinkies.
Oh, no.